Coming up on 5 Minute News. Republicans block Voting Rights Act from advancing. Supreme Court rejects Trump's attempt to shield documents from panel. And aid arriving in Tonga as airport finally reopens. It's Thursday, January 20, 2022. I'm Anthony Davis. Legislation that civil rights groups argued is vital for protecting democracy was blocked on Wednesday by a Republican filibuster, a setback for Democrats after a raw, emotional debate. They went on to attempt voting on a Senate rules change as a way to overcome the filibuster and approve the bill with a simple majority, but that also failed amid opposition from conservative Democratic Senators Joe Manchin and Kyrsten Sinema. The vote was 52 to 48, with the two Republican operatives joining all GOP senators. After the vote failed, there was a loud round of applause from Republicans. The initial vote was 49 to 51, short of the 60 votes needed to advance over the filibuster. Senate Majority Leader Chuck Schumer voted no for procedural reasons, so Democrats can revisit the legislation. The nighttime voting capped a day of piercing debate that carried echoes of an earlier era when the Senate filibuster was deployed in lengthy speeches by opponents of civil rights legislation. Voting rights advocates are warning that Republican-led states nationwide are passing laws making it more difficult for Black Americans and the poor to vote by consolidating polling locations, requiring certain types of identification, and ordering other changes. Democrats decided to press ahead despite the potential for high-stakes defeat at a tumultuous time for Biden and his party. Democrats wanted to force senators on the record, even their own party's holdouts, to show voters where they stand. Sinema and Manchin have withstood an onslaught of criticism from black leaders and civil rights organizations, and they risk further political fallout as other groups and even their own colleagues threaten to remove campaign support. In a rebuff to the former president, the Supreme Court is allowing the release of Donald Trump's presidential documents sought by the congressional committee investigating the January 6 insurrection. The justices on Wednesday rejected a bid by Trump to withhold the documents from the committee until the issue is finally resolved by the courts. Trump's lawyers had hoped to prolong the court fight and keep the documents on hold. Following the High Court's action, there is no legal impediment to turning over the documents, which are held by the National Archives and Records Administration, some of which the committee has already seen. They include presidential diaries, visitor logs, speech drafts, and handwritten notes dealing with January 6 from the files of former Chief of Staff Mark Meadows. The committee has already begun to receive records Trump wanted kept secret, said Representative Benny Thompson and Representative Liz Cheney, the committee chairman and vice chairwoman respectively. The Supreme Court's action tonight is a victory for the rule of law and American democracy, Thompson and Cheney said in a statement, pledging to uncover all the facts about the violence of January 6th and its causes. Alone among the justices, Clarence Thomas said he would have granted Trump's request to keep the documents on hold. In an unsigned opinion, the court acknowledged there are serious and substantial concerns over whether a former president can win a court order to prevent disclosure of certain records from his time in office in a situation like this one. Meanwhile, New York State's Attorney General has accused Donald Trump's family business of repeatedly misrepresenting the value of its assets to obtain financial benefits, citing what it said was significant new evidence of possible fraud. The accusations by Attorney General Letitia James mark a substantial escalation of her civil probe into the Republican former president's business, the Trump Organization, and the roles of his adult children. Aircraft carrying much-needed humanitarian supplies from Australia and New Zealand will arrive in tsunami-hit Tonga today, as the South Pacific island finally made contact with the rest of the world after being cut off for 5 days. Australian Defence Minister Peter Dutton said a Royal Australian Air Force aircraft loaded with humanitarian supplies and a sweeper to help remove ash from the airport runway had left Brisbane, and another aircraft would depart later today. New Zealand's Foreign Minister said its Air Force had also sent a C-130 Hercules from Auckland, which will land in the Tongan capital at about 4 p.m. New Zealand time. The delivery of supplies will be contactless, and the aircraft is expected to be on the ground for up to 90 minutes before returning to New Zealand. Tonga is COVID-19 free and is concerned that aid personnel may bring the virus. The explosion of the Tonga Harpe volcano, which has killed at least 3 people, sent tsunami waves across the Pacific on Saturday, badly damaging villages, resorts and many buildings in Tonga, and knocked out communications for the nation of about 105,000 people. The United Nations said about 84,000 people, more than 80% of the population, has been badly affected by the disaster. The volcano erupted about 40 miles from the Tongan capital, with the blast heard over 1,400 miles away in New Zealand. You can subscribe to 5-Minute News on YouTube with your preferred podcast app. Ask your smart speaker or enable 5-Minute News as your Amazon Alexa flash briefing skill. Subscribe, rate and review online at 5minute.news. 5-Minute News is an Evergreen podcast covering politics, inequality, health and climate, delivering independent, unbiased and essential world news daily.